Now what you see to my right, your left, is the Oder River. Now this river splits Poland, which is over there, to Germany, which is over here. Now then, I haven't come to examine the Oder River. I've actually come to look at something completely different, and I'll spin you around so you can have a look at what I'm going to look at. That is Kraftwerk Vogalsang. It's one of the number of power plants that were built in the Second World War to increase energy for electricity for the war effort. Before we go and have a look at it, I'll give you some history of this place and the reason why this is set up here. I'm at a place called Fürstenberg Oder. Now this place was set up in the 13th century and was controlled by the Cistercian Society, which I think is a Catholic society. Eventually it gained its independence. In 1848 it opened the canal called the Oder Spree Canal, or the Spree Canal, and that actually went straight into the heart of Berlin. So what that did then was it brought quite a lot of different industries towards this area. Now, beginning of the Second World War, this place became more important. They had quite a few different industries here to do with the war effort. So they needed somewhere, or they needed something to produce more power for the output of the actual war factories. Now, a company called the Rheinmetall Borsig, which eventually became Kraftwerk Hermann Göring Company, was based here. Focke-Wulf was based here. Another company called de Guza was based here as well. In 1942, Albert Speer, who was the Minister of Arms and Munitions, he was also the Minister of Water and Energy. He set up a programme called the Thermal Energy Programme. The idea of thermal power plants, like this thing here, is to create something that's in uniform. In other words, it's all across the board, whichever one they built on this one or other ones as well. The idea was to build as many uniform parts that will fit in here, that will be cheap to produce, and also be cheap to actually replace if it's something went wrong, or maybe if it got bombed, at least it could replace it. And the idea of that was to fit in places like this. The Germans hoped to build something like 15 units like this at an output of 300 megawatts, but it didn't quite work as they planned to. By the end of 1942, it was reduced down to 8 of these massive plants, mainly due to the iron and steel. They had very limited amount of materials to build stuff like this, so they wanted to turn it into the war effort, i.e. building tanks and planes and stuff like that. So these had to be sacrificed. By 1943, it was reduced down to 5 of these units because, obviously, as I said before, they needed the steel and all the rest of the stuff for fighting the Allies and the Russians. Well, there's my way in. Somebody's kindly opened it up for me. In 1942, prototypes of this building were built in the Hamburgish electricity works. Eventually 5 were produced, and this is no doubt one of them. There's a big chute. Can you see it there? There's a big chute here. I'm only guessing it could be the aftermarket of the coal that's been spent here. It may be going down to there, then it's obviously shifted off and carted away with trucks or wherever it may be. Gee, this is massive. I mean, where one of the towers is, you can see outside. God knows how big they are, probably 250, 100 metres at least. But it's absolutely massive. The stairs have been taken out for obvious reasons. You don't climb stuff like this, it's too dangerous. No other power plants were built exactly like this, just to produce more and more energy. And one was called Kraftwerk Trattendorf in Spienberg, and the other one's called Kraftwerk Bernsdorf, and now them both are actually in Poland. Right, these type of mines were built right next to lignite mines, basically open cast mines. Lignite is actually like a brown coal. It's poor in content as such as carbon, about 25-30%. Got a lot of moisture in it. It's just below the surface, so it's easy to dig out. It's easy to transport and cheap. Once it's exposed to air, then it dries out fairly quickly, but it still leaves about 30% moisture content. So no doubt the Germans have got an idea of how to get rid of it all, get rid of the moisture. This lignite is mainly used to power steam-generated machines like they would have had in here itself, because obviously it's cheap. And the Germans had abundance of it, so they might as well use it. There's two other power plants that use actually bituminous coal, which is no doubt probably a bit better than this type of coal. Kraftwerk Walter and Kraftwerk Wilhelm. Now, they were once in Germany, but now, with the borders changed after 1945, they're actually over in Poland. Markischer Electric Works, which is a Brandenburg company, actually took charge of building three of these brown coal places here about 1943. But before that, the actual lignite mine was opened about 1941. I'm actually in the other chimney, bottom of the chimney anyway. Now, the one without stairs in it, this one's got stairs in it, but I think a lot of the stairs have been taken out. It's much more open, I'll show you. I don't know what these places are, not a clue. I don't know anything about these buildings, only the history of them. Now as we walk around here, I've got to be careful, obviously it's dangerous. And I'm definitely not going to any higher than to this ground floor, so simple as that. It's just not risk with it. But at least I can give you the history of what went on here. Even though I don't know a great deal of what happened inside this building, if you know what I mean. As most stuff you see regarding the buildings and stuff that the Nazis did in the Third Reich between 39 and 45, this is no different. They used slave labour on this place from 1939 onwards. Stalag 3B, which is a labour camp, was set up by the Wehrmacht, which is the armed forces, just outside of Fürstenberg here itself, just to supply labour to this building. Now there's other companies around here that use slave labour because of the big camp I mentioned before. They formed sub-camps for themselves. One was Markischer Electric Works and the other one was Degusa. It has to be difficult to really contemplate slave labour in them days. I mean, you know, they were treated as dogs really, treated as no, and if one of them died, they'd just replace it with somebody else. Now Degusa, I mentioned before, were responsible. They were in the 64th of the top 100 before the war, and they jumped to really, I think, virtually top place. They dealt in gold and jewellery and stuff like that. Well, you think about all these camps where Degusa, I would send somebody in, and they would extract the gold out of the teeth, I'm assuming after these poor people had been put to death. So all they also supplied through subsidiary companies, Zyklon B, which was initially to kill lice, but eventually it started to kill people. In 1944, this plant was up and ready. It took 1 year to build. Now they reckon it was about 75 megawatt in power, so they say anyway. And this was actually one of 5 successful power plants that the Nazis, the Germans, actually produced to give power to their industries. But by 1944, they were run out of time anyway. Eventually, this plant was changed its name to Kraftwerk Vogalsang, which I think I mentioned at the beginning of this. I started to talk anyway. A year after this plant was built, it was starting to produce electricity, 75 megawatts. And they reckon it was successful, but they wanted really 300 megawatts out of these plants, and they had 5 that they wanted to make into, obviously, energy for their war industry. Out of the 5 power plants or uniform plants that were built along this one here, they reckon it's only this one here, Kraftwerk Vogelsang, that actually produced any electricity. This building I'm still underneath, when I first saw it, it's very similar to one at Friedland, which is East Lichtenau. But it's not, it's got no chutes here. I expected there to be some chutes for coal so they could power this power plant up with the electricity it's supplied. But obviously it's not, it's for something else, but I don't know what it is. But there must be a lignite mine round here somewhere. No doubt it's overgrown now. By February 1945, the Soviet troops and tanks could be seen just over the river here. So eventually the staff here were evacuated, and some of them even ended up joining the Volkssturm, which is the People's Army really. Now the Germans, a bit further down, there's a bridge. The Germans actually blew it up to try and slow the Soviet advance. But there was one problem, and I'll mention that later on. By the time the Soviets got here, there was very fierce fighting, because obviously the Germans didn't want to give this up and the Soviets wanted to overtake it. Eventually, when the Soviets overran this place, the stacks that you saw before, which are 100 metres actually, the Russians used them as viewpoints to see what was happening in the surrounding area and how far they were going on, how far the Germans were being pushed back. It says that more and more troops are pushed into this area, German troops I'm assuming, they would have been, but ill-equipped and they weren't very well trained. So they reckon the casualty rate on the German side was over 70%. By the 28th of February 1945, the Russians had virtually captured all of this area, including Vogelsang, but they had to stop because they ran out of supplies. By April 1945, the Russians were knocking on the door of Berlin. They were surrounding it there. Yet, the fighting at this area, Vogelsang, was still ongoing. It's overgrown now, but just through there's that building with that chute on it. I'm only guessing it's something to do with this building, but obviously I don't know. I have no information on it. I'm not sure, but this could have been some kind of living area for the plants, the people that live in the plant. Because there's a hole there, and it looks like there should be like a chimney going up it. Only guessing, it looks like that, so maybe it was some kind of accommodation. That jetty there, I couldn't get to it. I tried, there's no way around it. You can get part of it to the side, but generally you couldn't really get to any other way. There's a fence there, but the fence is slightly open to the right hand side. But you couldn't get to it. You can walk about 20 foot and that's it. That's all you can do. But end of the day, maybe it's a good idea me not get on that jetty. It looks so dilapidated. Right, let's have a look at that bridge that the Germans blew up to try and slow the Soviet Union down. Remember that bridge I told you about, that the Germans blew up? Well, we're walking on it now, or what's left of it. I'm on the Polish side of it. It's called the Southern Oder Bridge. And I'll put a few pictures on of what it used to look like from about 1920 to 1945, I think it is, something like that. The Germans blew it up because they wanted to stop the advancing Russian army. So anyway, they blew it up on the 4th of February And they did the trick. They stopped the military, I should say, they stopped the army, like the tanks and all that coming, but they didn't really stop the Russian troops. Reason why? Because the River Oder here was solid. It was frozen. So all the Russian army did was just skate across it and start to attack over there. You can see the crack in it. Look at it. Wow. It's a bit scary walking on this bridge, to be honest with you. It's that much, that's it. Nothing left on the other side. Absolutely gone. More like the Germans have just tidied it all up, but here, the Polish have left it as a, probably a memorial maybe, for the Russians advancing and liberating the country in one way or another anyway. I know it was occupied until about 89, 92, but end of the day, they did get their independence back when the Soviet Union collapsed. Thanks for watching. Hopefully, I'll see you on another video. See you again.